certainly the topic of my book is immigration, but in the process of writing it, it seemed to me that immigration really defines a lot of our human experience. Our lives are about immigration, about moving from something we know to something we don't know, right? Changing a school, changing a relationship, going in and out of relationships, moving from some place where we know the code, we know the rules, we know the landscape, and going to some place new where we are thrown back on our own character, our own sense of what we brought with us to try to interpret how to behave in this new place. So, but to get to the literal part of the immigration, besides the tremendous amount of research that any historical novel came to, I drew on my own experience that in 1990 I moved from Northern California to Southern Italy. And those are two very, very different places. Even another very, 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 very different places. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I'm just asking a question. What year did you move from Southern California to Northern Italy?
1990. And then in 2000, I moved from Southern Italy to Eastern Tennessee. And those are also two very, very different places. And having been away from the United States for 10 years, I was even not understanding what people said. I kept saying, excuse me, and I was drinking sweet tea, and they were usually heavier. It was all very different. And this novel is set in a town called Opie, and I brought this large map of Italy. Now, it's interesting that Opie is here, and if you were as close as I am, you would still not see it. So, here's why. This is Opie, where it starts. You see, it's small.
Is that a real name or a fictitious name?
No, it's a real name. The name Opie, I discovered it was a pre-Christian name of a tribe that lived here for a goddess of plenty. And I think this is sort of wishful thinking, because this was never a place of plenty. And here it is in the winter. And in the first chapter, Irma's constantly talking about the big city that she sees down below Pescasseroli, which is now about 3,000 people. And this is the view of Opie from Pescasseroli. So you can see the uniting feature of all these is it's small. All right, I'll hand these around. So how it happened is that we had very dear friends, Anna Maria and Ezio, who had said that they had discovered this place where we could go cross-country skiing. And I went with my husband, who's there in the purple sweater. And the thing about cross-country skiing is that there's this up and down quality, you know, particularly in the mountains. And that was not really what I was taking to. So while other people were doing pretty adventurous cross-country skiing, I was sort of not. And started to volunteer to walk around and buy food. And I was fascinated by this place, by its solitude, by the very grave courtesy of the people. And also noticed that in some of the buildings there were dates from the late 1800s, and I thought, where did the money come from in the late 1800s to build these houses? And it seemed likely that that money came from America, because there was a lot of money coming back, or people coming back. They made it here or didn't make it here, but brought back some money. And then I started to see how few houses, there were. And suppose there was someone there for whom Opie was their world, they did not know anymore. And suppose adding on to that was a family history that everyone who left came to grief. And I realized I'm talking about Opie, but I got to also be talking about very small towns in Appalachia. So you have a young person there who desperately wants to stay. And the first chapter is about closing off the avenues of staying so that who she was could no longer endure there. And the only way out was to do the one thing that was the most terrifying, and that was to leave. So I wrote the first chapter as a short story. We had moved to Knoxville, And I was writer-in-residence at the University of Tennessee Library, and I wrote that short story and published that. It was a lead short story in New Letters magazine. And then a few years later, after doing another project, I thought I'd go back and follow Irma to America.